Hello, Wake Forest. It's great to be back with you. I actually spent the night at Wake in 2012 during my spring break. I went to a frat party and a bar. I don't remember what either was called, but I had a great time, and that's one of the main reasons I agreed to do this talk. I'll get into that story a little later, but the point is, not too long ago, I was in college in a very similar position to you all. I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I still don't, to be honest, but I always thought it was cool to hear from older folks what their careers were, how they ended up there, and maybe some lessons they learned along the way. And now I look in the mirror and I realize I'm the old guy. So my name's Jack Coyne and I make YouTube videos for a living. That's not a career that my parents or my college professors really understand, but I imagine it's something that people your age totally do understand. Now, just saying that I make YouTube videos is a major simplification of my job. I don't have millions of subscribers or viewers. I don't get paid to take part in pay-per-view boxing matches. I don't get to give away Teslas to my friends. But I do get to spend my days doing what I love. And that's the important part of this talk. I want to tell you about my career and some of the steps I took along the way to get to a place where I have a job that I love. And I want you to spend all your days doing what you love. So whether or not your dream job is to be a YouTuber or has anything to do with social media, I think that there are some lessons in here that might be valuable to you. My goal in this Spill the Tea talk is to be as transparent and forthcoming as possible because I think that's how you'll learn the most from me. So right now, in April 2021, I'm 30 years old. I graduated college in 2013, and 2 weeks later, I started my first post-collegiate job. And at the time, I thought, okay, Jack, this is your first job. You'll go from this one to the next job, to the next job, to the next job until it's time to retire. And I thought this because that's what my parents did, and that's what all the older people I knew did, and that's what you see on TV and everything else. But as of today, I haven't had a job in a little over 3 years. If you told me when I was 22, I'd be pretty freaked out. But now, I'm very comfortable with it. I actually hope I never have to have a job again. So what happened? In short, I got fired from my last job, and I was faced with a major inflection point in my career. You never know when one of these career-altering moments is going to come up, when you'll have to make a major decision about what to do next. But you do have your past experiences, the lessons you've learned, people you admire, and your willingness to take a risk that can guide you in the right direction. I'll tell you more about that decision that I made a little later, but first let's go back to the beginning of my career so I can tell you everything that led up to that inflection point and some of the lessons that I learned along the way. I became interested in working in film when I was in high school. I got really into the movie Goodfellas, and I was like, I want to make stuff like this because movies made me happy. Movies and entertainment make a lot of people happy. I went to a liberal arts school called Wesleyan in Connecticut because they had this super nice movie theater and a pretty good film program, and that's what I wanted to do. I majored in film studies and economics. The summer after my freshman year, I wanted to get an internship in the film industry, but I was having trouble finding something. But there was this ad that I kept seeing on the buses in New York for a new HBO show called The Neistat Brothers. On the poster it said, a homemade TV show. This caught my attention. A couple weeks later, I watched the first episode of the show and immediately realized that this was the type of filmmaking I could get into. I knew I needed to work with these guys. So the question was, how do I get my foot in the door? What kind of email can I write that will make them say, okay, let's give this kid a shot? And this is one of the most important lessons I learned early on in my career and something I've thought about a lot when hiring people. I made the conversation completely about what I could do to make their lives easier. Instead of thinking about or worrying about how this was going to benefit me, I thought, how can I show you in this email that I'm just going to make your life and your job easier and ask for nothing in return? So I wrote that I admired their work, and in order to help, I'd love to come in and basically mop the floors and clean up and do whatever little things around the office that would make it easier for them to do their jobs. And then I'd do it for free. The reason I was willing to do this without asking for anything in return was because I knew I'd gained a lot just by being in the same room as these people, just by learning from observation. How does someone work once you get a peek behind the curtain? My objective was to make like a sponge and absorb as much information as possible. Pretty quickly, a funny thing happened. I was given the opportunity to do a little more each day. If you're working hard for someone, even at something as menial as sweeping up, they'll start to notice and realize there's probably more that you can do. There are a few important lessons here. One is that if you want to get something from someone professionally, first figure out what you can do for them. 2 is that you learn a lot just by being in the room. So figure out how to get in the room. 3 is that you shouldn't think of yourself as too good for a certain type of job. Showing a high degree of care and dedication to even small menial tasks is an exercise in discipline that's helpful in all aspects of your life. One of the most important things I learned in that early internship was the importance of doing things to learn. At the time I was studying film, I had these dreams of being a Hollywood filmmaker, but I had no clue how to make movies really. It was this first summer gig that inspired me to get my head out of the books and actually try and make stuff. You're never going to be a filmmaker unless you actually start making films. And it was a summer of watching these guys constantly making these little films that made me realize I needed to start doing this too. I needed to pick up the camera and start making things. And I think that this separated me from a lot of the other kids in my class. I spent a huge amount of my time outside of class trying to make these little videos just for fun. And most of them were really, really, really bad. And the thing is, it's embarrassing to make something and have it suck. And that's why we come up with excuses to not make something. Because it's much easier to imagine how great your work would be if it wasn't for the million excuses that we make up. But you learn a lot more from making something that sucks than not making something that might be great. The more of these crappy things you make, you'll slowly realize you're getting better. More importantly, you're learning skills along the way. In college, I learned a lot about writing essays. I've written 0 essays since I graduated. In my free time, I edited videos, and I've edited hundreds of videos and gotten paid for it. So the lesson is, if you're interested in working in a certain field or industry, can you come up with a hobby that's going to help you develop skills that you can apply in that field? Can you figure out what skills people in your industry are looking for and start to develop those skills? I don't say this to dismiss college at all. I loved every minute of it, and I learned so much from all the classes I took. But college is also about exploring your other interests and developing skills in addition to those you're picking up in the classroom. And that wasn't really clear to me when I was going into it, but it's very clear now looking back. When I graduated from college, I was offered a full-time job by Casey Neistat, who I'd interned for every summer. The job was to be an assistant and office manager and basically help him make YouTube videos. Now, by the older people in my life, my parents and school teachers, this was a strange job to take. It was seen as a sort of dead end. Of course, they didn't realize how fast YouTube was growing and how important a piece of the media landscape it would become. I was told to look for a job in Hollywood if I wanted to get into film, but I saw things differently, and I think I had more relevant experience. I recognized that in 2013, people were watching more and more videos online, and it was somebody's job to make those videos. When I graduated college, mobile internet speeds weren't quite fast enough for people to watch videos on their phones regularly, but it was obvious that this was coming. More and more of our time would be spent watching videos on our phones, and YouTube creators like Casey were an obvious source for these videos. And I was 22 years old. Why not try and take a chance doing a job I knew that I would like, that my gut was telling me to take? The company was super small. It was just me and my boss, so there would be lots of opportunities to learn all sorts of new skills. In the first year, I shot and produced countless videos. I took a class at night on bookkeeping so I could manage the company's finances and keep track of budgets. I got to meet countless interesting people who came through the office for different projects. Most importantly, though, I was pushed out of my comfort zone and forced to constantly learn new skills. The most important lesson I learned in this early gig is that there was nothing I couldn't do. Everything I could ever want to learn is Googleable. From fixing a camera, to learning how to drive stick shift, to rewiring a light switch, to installing a sink, there was nothing I couldn't learn how to do with the power of the internet. And I had a boss who would rather see me try to figure out how to do something and fail than say I didn't know how to do it. And that's a lesson that I've carried with me in all aspects of my life to this point. The more times you try to figure out something you don't know how to do, the more confident you become in yourself. A year or so into this job, I faced a major shift. Casey was given an opportunity to start a social media company, and I was offered a job as the first employee. This would mean putting aside my filmmaking career and focusing on something dramatically different. But on the other hand, it was an opportunity to try and build something entirely new from the ground up. Again, I would get to learn a whole new set of skills and do so in an industry that was clearly growing. Tech companies like Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, Vine were all taking off. So I hit pause on my filmmaking aspirations and went full steam into the tech world. We started a company called Beam in 2014, and I got to do everything from running business administration to heading community to managing user feedback to working in product development. I spent countless hours in the office, often getting in at 6:30 in the morning and leaving at 10 or 11 at night. There was always an endless list of things to do and never enough hours in the day. But you can learn a lot under this type of pressure. In 2017, Beam was sold to CNN for $27 million. I was paid out for the equity I had in the company and offered a job under the CNN umbrella. We were shifting back into the business of making videos. After 3 years working in a tech startup, I had a new opportunity to be a video creator, and I started working on YouTube videos again under the Beam News moniker. Unfortunately, the relationship between Beam and CNN never really clicked, and a year later, the partnership was shut down, and I was laid off. I was 27 years old, and up to this point, everything I'd done in my career was a progression from one thing to the next. This was the first time that the next step wasn't so obvious. And this is why it was such an important inflection point. I had to look back at everything I'd done up to that point and add it all up. What did I like doing? What did I want to be? How did I want to spend my days? I decided to make a YouTube video to summarize my work experiences up to that point. It went viral, and I realized that maybe this was something I could do independently, or at least I could try. I had long realized the power of storytelling online. I had some money saved up from the sale of the company a year earlier, and I would get 2.5 months of severance pay from CNN. I had flexibility to take my time figuring out my next move, and I knew I had developed a wide set of valuable skills. It was in this transition period that I started to put the puzzle together and figure out how to turn those skills into my own small business. So now we're back at the beginning of the story, and I've spent the last 3 years figuring out my current job one day at a time. I still make YouTube videos on a consistent basis. Sometimes I get paid by sponsors to make these videos, but more often I try to do it for fun. In addition to these sponsored YouTube videos, I operate a production company with my brother. We specialize in helping businesses tell their stories through video. Having a YouTube channel where I can share creative projects helps bring more clients into the business. It's a sort of proof that we know what we're doing. Every single day, more and more videos made by pros are uploaded to the internet. There's a never-ending stream of businesses that need people like me to make these videos. The irony is that in the past year, movie theaters have shut down, but the internet, of course, has not. I think about what if I'd pursued that more traditional path that so many of my teachers suggested, and I worked in Hollywood. Would I be able to work on something now? I can sit in my office and make a video all by myself whenever I want to. And as soon as it's done, I can put it on the internet, and who knows might watch it and what kind of opportunity that might turn into. At the end of the day, I'm also just happy to be making videos. That was my goal from the beginning, and I still firmly believe that I'm getting better with each one. I'm getting better at shooting and editing and writing and still learning new tricks and techniques. You don't know what twists and turns your career is going to take. But as long as you're trying to learn as much as possible along the way, I think it'll turn out okay. Take stock of the things that you're interested in. How can you do more of these things in a way that's productive? They say that if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. And I know that's cliche, but it's true. If you follow what's in your heart and really dedicate yourself to it, you'll build your dream job. Thank you.